I was just a young boy, maybe 8 or 9, when my parents told me the good news. I was going to be a big brother. They left me with my grandmother while they went to their ultrasound appointment. My parents were bursting at the seams with joy when they came to pick me up. They then gave me the best news of my young life. My mother was carrying twins. I can't even begin to describe the glee that I felt at that moment. The prospect of finally having not only one, but 2 younger siblings, filled me with unbridled excitement. I couldn't wait to meet them, teach them, protect them. Times were hard. Money was scarce, but we were all ecstatic nonetheless. I wish I could say that my mother had a smooth pregnancy, but she was sick all the time, barely ate anything, and rarely ever acted like herself. Her doctor feared that the lack of nutrients would harm the twins. I wish we had known how right he was. As time went on, she became more irritable, more angry towards everyone. We didn't know whether it was the hunger, the pregnancy, or her sickness. All we knew was that something was terribly wrong. Regardless, we tried our best to care for her and make her happy. One day, they came back from an ultrasound appointment in tears. They told me to go into the other room so that they could speak with my grandmother in private about the situation. But I, being a kid, made it my mission to find out what the adults were talking about. I crept across Grandma's shag carpet, careful to not make a sound until I was finally within earshot of their conversation. Mom had lost one of the twins. The ultrasound showed that only one of them remained in her womb. She said that there was no bleeding nor signs of a miscarriage, and that her doctor said the gestational sac may have been absorbed by her body, or perhaps by the remaining twin. Although she was further along in her pregnancy than when this phenomenon typically occurs. I remember crying about the loss, but I was still happy that one of them was okay, and that I'd still get to be a big brother soon. I retreated into my play area and fiddled with my toys as I quietly sobbed to myself. When they were finished going over the sensitive information, my parents came to find me and gave me the edited version. Although one twin didn't make it, my remaining sibling would be a little brother. The closer that Mom got to her due date, the more her condition worsened. She progressively ate less and became more belligerent. Losing one of the twins didn't help much either, and neither Dad nor I knew how to console her, nor what to do for her. Sometimes even the smallest thing could set her off, so we walked on eggshells and minded our P's and Q's. My old man and I spent a lot of time out back in the shed, where he taught me how to tinker with, clean, and repair various things. I cherish the time we spent together during those days. Other than the day you were born, they are by far my favorite memories. One day while we were out in the shed, we heard blood-curdling wails of agony emanating from our house. My father and I looked at each other in confusion for a split second, then our eyes widened as we simultaneously realized that it was my mother. We dropped everything and took off sprinting towards the house, both of us calling for her. My father was the first to reach the back door, throwing it open with such force that I thought it would smash through the kitchen wall. We tore through the house toward their bedroom, knocking over the furniture in our path in a mad scramble to reach her. Upon arriving at the bedroom door, my father grabbed a hold of the knob and put his shoulder into it, nearly ripping it from the hinges. And neither of us could believe what we saw. My mother lay sprawled across the bed, motionless. Her abdomen was split open, appearing as if something had forced its way out from the inside. The room had been overtaken by the stench of decay, as if something dead had been festering in the room for weeks. Crouched inside of the gaping hole was my baby brother. Although he looked nothing like a human infant, I knew right away that it was him. His skin was gray like the flesh of a corpse, tightly stretched over a lanky skeleton. He was hunched over, rummaging through my mother's flesh and organs as he took bites from various chunks. My brother then realized that we were there, watching him in horrified disbelief. He stood up and turned around to look at us with those ungodly, pasty white eyes, and a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth that were littered with pieces of my mother. He turned his head upward and sniffed the air a few times before returning his gaze to us. The sight chilled us both to the core and admittedly caused me to wet my pants. My father came to his senses much quicker than I did and promptly reached for the baseball bat that leaned against their dresser. My little brother fell forward. He threw his gangly hands outward to catch himself, then entered into a doubled-over position as he arched his back. His spine began to pop and grow rapidly, followed by the rest of his skeleton. The skin pulled over his bones stretched ever tighter to accommodate the growth, and we watched in disbelief as he doubled in size right before our very eyes. Once the process had finished, he looked up at us and emitted an ear-splitting screech, which sounded like a combination of a scream and a hiss. My father drew back the bat, fully prepared to strike. But before he could, my little brother leapt down to the floor and then launched himself through the closed window, smashing it into oblivion. My father held his stance in shock for a few moments before he crept over to the window, checking to see if the coast was clear. Looks like it's gone. You aight, boy? He asked me, then dropped the bat and embraced me for the last time. Come sit outside, I gotta call the law. When the police arrived and saw the scene, they immediately arrested my father. They blamed him for my mother's death and claimed that he had disemboweled her before doing God knows what with my little brother. They wouldn't listen to anything he nor I had to say about the matter. They ruled him criminally insane and sent him to a mental hospital to live out the rest of his days. Which wasn't very long. Unable to cope with what he had seen, on top of being blamed for the death of the love of his life, he was crushed by the weight and eventually committed suicide. They found short a note scrawled in blood on the walls of his room, which read, "Forgive me, son. I love you." So, you're saying that the thing I saw is... I started before my father cut me off. That's right, Matt. It's your uncle. My father replied, I've spent my whole life learning about him, and things like him, ever since. All the time I've been away, I've been hunting. Hunting? I asked, both confused and curious. Yup. Your uncle vanished from this area after the incident your pawpaw and I witnessed. But now he's returned. My mind has been consumed with the desire to find him and put him down since that day. After many years, and more than my fair share of experience, I finally know how. Now all of the visible wear and tear on his flesh made sense. I see. But why didn't you tell me any of this sooner? Why did you let me continue to believe that Pawpaw was a lunatic who murdered Mamaw, and that you had turned your back on me? And where did you learn how to fight these things? I wanted to protect you. I felt you were better off hating your Pawpaw and me than knowing what's really out there. But now I ain't got much choice, he responded, before addressing the rest of my inquiry. Your uncle ain't the only kinda abomination out there running round. I've been a little bit of everywhere, talking to folks who know the truth. Folks who learnt from their predecessors, and pass on the knowledge to people like me. It's a rabbit hole that goes back fair millennia. Well, in that case, why haven't you taken care of my uncle yet? My father looked away for a moment, then leaned forward in the chair. He interlocked his fingers and brought them to his lips in contemplation. Well, to be perfectly honest, son. He dropped his head, I couldn't do it. I became irate, disgusted with his response. What do you mean you couldn't do it? Look at everything he's done. I know, boy. I know that I should be more than capable, and willing. But in the end, he's still my baby brother. I've loved him since before he was even born. And for some strange reason that I can't explain, I guess that fact alone was enough to prevent me from finishing the job. You're unbelievable. I barked at him. So what then? You're just gonna let him continue to stalk our woods and kill people? Dad looked down at the floor in silence for a while before eventually bringing his gaze back to me, of course not, because I'm gonna teach you how to kill him. Once you've seen something like it, there ain't no going back to normal life, anyways. I'm gonna teach you everything I know. You can't be serious. Me? Why else would I be here explaining everything to you? If your friend Rick wasn't enough of a reason to get riled up, now you have another. I didn't know how to respond. In all honesty, my feeling of irritation towards Dad, and his reluctance to end this when he had the chance, nearly made me refuse and lash out at him in spite. But I then began to weigh those emotions against how I felt about all of the pain and devastation my uncle had wrought. My anger quickly turned into determination. He was absolutely right, I wanted to. No, I had to kill this beast. I'll do it. But not fair you, old man. Fair Mamaw and Pawpaw, and fair Rick. Fair every other life that bastard has cut short. My father cracked a smile and chuckled a little. He tried to hide the pride on his face as he spoke. That's my boy. We've got some time before you're healed up enough to start the physical training, so we may as well start with the basics. He reached down beside the chair and retrieved an old weathered backpack. He pulled open the zipper, reached inside, and brought forth two thick, leather-bound books. One was fresh, while the other was visibly tattered and worn. This, he started, then got up out of the chair and walked over to me, is everything I've seen, everything I know. It's ours to share. He handed me the old one, then held up the fresh one, and this one is yours. Here's a pen, start whenever you get the notion. Dad, my father cut me off, start reading. There are plenty of things in there you need to know before we move on. Okay. Thanks, Dad, I replied solemnly. My father turned away and headed for the door to my hospital room, opened it, then looked back at me before exiting. I'm gonna leave you to it for a little bit. I'll be back with something to eat. He lowered his head and turned back to the doorway, and I'm sorry for everything. I hope you can understand and forgive me. Sorry about your mother. He stepped through the doorway and left before I could say a word. I flipped the cover of my father's book and began to read. This handwritten journal went into detail about his many horrific experiences with a plethora of beasts, which, until now, I had believed to exist only in nightmares. It was also rife with descriptions and statistics, abilities, weaknesses, and recounted how he had not only managed to track but also slay a great number of them. This information instilled a newfound respect for my father within me, an appreciation for him that I never imagined I'd have in all my life. My father is a hardcore, seasoned hunter. And soon, I will be too.